Thanks for pressing play on another edition of Another Dolphins podcast. March is winding down. The first wave of free agency is in the books. If you haven't checked it out yet, we did our first mock draft of the year last week with Kat, so be sure to check that out. But Josh, it's a little bit of a lull in the calendar, so I thought it being March 31st as we're recording, it would be a great opportunity to kind of put a bow on the month, to kind of finalize, to put the roster into perspective of where the Miami Dolphins stand less than roughly 2 weeks before the NFL draft. But Josh, with everything that's going on in Miami, they're signing linebackers, they're signing tight ends, they're restructuring contracts, and all of a sudden we're still talking about Tyreek Hill trade rumors. Is that any surprise to you?
I guess not. I mean, we didn't really think there was going to be that big splash signing right in free agency. So I guess it all goes back to Tyreek Hill because he is that explosive playmaker. And because that's what everybody wants to know, right? Is he going to be traded? Is he going to be on the Dolphins in 2025? As we'll talk about it, Mike McDaniel gave us a pretty good answer, I guess, and a whole lot of nothing, to be honest, at the league meetings. But yeah, man, it doesn't surprise me that the superstar, the guy voted number one by his peers at one point, the guy that almost broke Megatron's record, not surprising that he still remains the talk of the town in Miami.
So the three tweets, Tyreek Hill went on a little Twitter spree on Sunday. First one, Fins Nation, would you be open to trading Tyreek Hill? Tyreek just kind of retweeted that with a smiley face. Then Jason Fitzgerald from Over the Cap, he tweeted, he was actually asked who would be one player that would be a surprise NFL draft night trade. And he right away said Tyreek Hill. I had to retweet that one just to kind of make people mad. And then after reposting both of those, Tyreek Hill, icing on the cake, just put up deuces. Josh, I just checked. Tyreek did delete this from his Twitter bio, but it always said for the longest time, I like to start trouble and leave. Now, there's two ways to take these. Is Tyreek, was he bored on a Sunday? Because, I mean, you could go on Twitter, you can go on X, you can go Blue Sky, Facebook, wherever. You can see somebody with any opinion in the entire world. That's the good and the bad of social media. There's every day for the rest of time, someone's going to be saying Dolphins should trade Tyreek. Was there anything unique about this Sunday, or do you think it was just Tyreek starting trouble and then walking away again?
Yeah, I mean, it seemed more like that, right? I mean, I do feel like there's some truth to this. I mean, we heard him say in week 18, he came right out and said, I want to be traded. Deuces, I'm out of here. So there has to be a little bit of underlying truth to that. But if you go on their social media, I mean, we know how it is, right? We tweet something and there can be people just, that you never even interacted with, just shitting all over your opinion. Imagine that times a million if you're Tyreek Hill. So I feel like he probably definitely, gets it gets off in a way of trying to make the haters get more upset or try to pour gasoline on this type of stuff. So I don't think there was anything too out of the ordinary here, but again, I do still feel like there's a little bit of truth because he came right out and told us at one point, I don't want to be here, I want to go somewhere else. And I don't know that the Dolphins, right, they had to bring in more dogs, he said, and things like that. I mean, you look at this roster, did they do enough to bring in dogs compared to last year? I mean, but yeah, not a lot there. Sorry for going on a little rant.
Dude, it's a March podcast. Our job is to rant. Speaking of terrible Twitter accounts, yesterday also NFL Rumors verified account. NFL Rumors, super verified. Tyreek Hill reportedly, doesn't cite a report, would be okay if the hashtag Dolphins traded him to a playoff contender. Tyreek Hill quote tweeted that one and just saying, LOL, another false narrative. This kind of speaks to the idea that you're just going to hear anything on Twitter and people can take it and run in any which direction. But Josh, I think part of the big question here is the Dolphins are in such a unique offseason. James Daniels, their big, present under the Christmas tree, he's the only player the Dolphins have signed so far who have money past the 2025 season. They didn't have an opportunity to go out and sign dogs. So you have I'm going to go through here. The 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yes, great podcasting. I know. I apologize. Going real quick, Josh, the top 13 cap hits of the Miami Dolphins next year were on the roster last year. Jason Sanders is part of that list, the Miami Dolphins kicker. You have to get 13 players past Kader Kohou to get to James Daniels. I think that might be part of the reason this continues to be a conversation. Because, like it or not, this Dolphins team was never going to change. Like, you bought in with Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Tua, Jalen Ramsey. Josh, I think one of our favorite tweets to reference is when everyone was like, thank you, Jalen Ramsey, for restructuring your contract. You're such a team player. And then he just quote tweets. He's like, nah, dude, I'm still getting my money. This was never going to be something that changes overnight. I think after week 18, Josh, we both kind of felt gross. Like, there are a lot of dogs in that locker room. Terron Armstead, he's out there fighting every week. Calais Campbell, he picked to join the Miami Dolphins. Has your stance, from that emotional time about how you felt about Tyreek Hill changed in the last 2 months or so?
Yeah, I'm not sure it has. I mean, I think if anything, I'm kind of doubling down on, before he was the Miami Dolphin. I just remember, thinking that this dude, for lack of a better word, was a terrible person, right? So then when he came to Miami, I overlooked all that stuff. The dude was putting up insane numbers. So I still feel like I feel that way. But as far as from the Dolphins' perspective, I mean, I always went back to, if you are Mike McDaniel and Chris Greer fighting for your life in 2025, are you going to trade away your best player that both of you, honestly, I mean, you guys were tied to Tua Tagovailoa just like you're tied to the Tyreek Hill because you made that massive investment. What was it, 5 draft picks? So I always go back to that and wondering if they were ever even going to give if it was ever even a potential of him being traded, unless a team comes and just wows you, right? And that's not going to happen in today's NFL. We see the receiver trade market. I mean, it's nothing like it was back then. So my opinion has not changed, but I do think my opinion on the Dolphins, you have to move on from him. You cannot bring him back. I mean, again, it all goes back to how Calais Campbell, Terron Armstead, those guys view Tyreek Hill. Are you past that? Are you past him saying he doesn't want to be here? Are you past him quitting on your team? If you are, I'm okay with that. So I know the Dolphins are in quite a tight spot here, but I don't think, like you said, man, I think we all kind of expected Tyreek Hill to be back in 2025. I don't know that anything that McDaniel said, though, truly put to rest any of these rumors, right? We're probably still going to hear this stuff come draft night, a couple weeks after, whatever it might be. But it does sound like Tyreek Hill will be a Dolphin in 2025.
So the NFL owners, coaches, front office are currently meeting at the NFL yearly meetings. They're talking about banning the tush push. They're discussing an 18-game season. And Mike McDaniel did say in full word salad fashion, that is Mike McDaniel, we are fully planning to move forward as a better version of our relationship with Tyreek Hill and the Miami Dolphins. I have no reason to think otherwise. And Josh, you hit the nail on the head. This team is in a must-win season. You can't be going out and just making statements to just, trade off someone for a 4th-round pick just because. Like, the Dolphins are not in a scenario to do this. I do think that, I'm reeling back in. I don't want to trade Tyreek, but the big fear for me, what if this team starts 1-4, right? That is the one, like, one of the things Mike McDaniel was asked about, and I'll share the full quote in a second, but he was talking about like being on the hot seat, and would we be having the same conversation if the Dolphins won 2 more games? There is such a small margin for error that if the Dolphins get out to another, rough start the year 1-3, 1-4, like that's not an insurmountable deficit. But I do wonder if someone like Tyreek could handle that, right? Because if the Dolphins, the first time they face turbulence in a must-win season, it can go one of 2 ways, man. And being a Dolphins fan, it just feels like it's going to go that ugly path. So I think more than me worrying about trading Tyreek Hill, I kind of just wish he wasn't doing this stuff just because, when you are in the war, the 17-game season, and things aren't going your way, what's to say he's not going to throw a fit? And when your second highest paid player is throwing a massive fit, you're not going to win football games. And that's kind of where my fear stems from. But at the end of the day, I do understand him being on the team. And I do understand we do a podcast year round. It's March 31st. There ain't nothing to talk about. So if Tyreek Hill tweeted anything about his favorite color, whatever it may be, we're going to sit here and talk about it.
Yeah, and he's probably gonna do it again, right? The trolling's not gonna stop. It doesn't matter whether he deleted this, that, or that. I mean, he's gonna continue to do it, and we'll probably continue to pod about it. But Jake, I always go back to that. You saying, I think you touched on it before, but yeah, the biggest concern is it gonna boil over? Like, okay, everything's pushed under the rug now, but there's a catastrophic injury or something that just throws some type of any type of doubt into the season. Maybe Tyreek Hill, turns into that prima donna that we saw. So again, I don't think the Dolphins are better off without Tyreek Hill, but is the locker room, and I mean, based on Mike McDaniel's comments, it doesn't sound like it is.
Mike McDaniel was asked about job security. He said, Nick Sirianni, coach of the Philadelphia Eagles, I want to be on that hot seat he was on last year. I thought that was a super interesting response, Josh. He basically dug in a little deeper, saying, like, this is such a quick moving league. Think about it. He was hired to be coach of the Miami Dolphins, late January of 2021. Snap your fingers, all of a sudden 4 years later. That's how quickly it goes by. You don't have a lot of time to pick up on things. You don't have a lot of time to grow. While McDaniel continues continues to, have his jokes and use the word salad. I think the one thing he's been since day one is vulnerable. And I think I've always appreciated that about him because, again, dude, we're doing a podcast in March. There ain't games going on until September. Nothing is going to change of our opinion of this team. The draft, look at how much the over-under odds for each team changes after the draft. They don't move. They do not move. So while we think like the 13th pick is going to have a huge impact to the Dolphins, nothing's going to change, until September. So I kind of like him having this idea of, maybe like being a surfer riding a wave. Sometimes there's going to be a lot of turbulence. There's going to be a lot of moving parts, but other times, man, you're just going to have to paddle a little bit. You're just going to have to deal with it, listen to the noise, because whether you're playing or not, we're going to yap.
Yeah, I mean, and it's true, right? I mean, right or wrong, the highs and the lows of the NFL, it's absolutely insane, right? I mean, we're sitting here thinking about what the Miami Dolphins offense, every team was trying to replicate them. They could not be stopped. And then last season, complete opposite, right? The same thing with Tua Tagovailoa throughout his career, this, that, and the other thing. So I also like that he brought up, Sirianni, because he was a guy that, I mean, I live close to Philly. I mean, those fans absolutely, they were ready to move on from based on after all the success he had, which is just the Philadelphia way. So yeah, I hope he's on that hot seat. I hope we're looking back at this kind of laughing. And I know that he made light of the situation, but he always, like you mentioned, man, he is vulnerable. He does admit that, he isn't entitled to anything, that he's in a great situation, and he doesn't, take for granted the opportunity he has in the NFL. So I hope that this 2025 season, whether, him and Chris Greer are tied together. So whatever we think of one or the other, I mean, I want to see this team have success. I'm tired of being, on the bottom of the barrel. So I hope that he can replicate Nick Sirianni's success. And we're just sitting here laughing at, him being on the hot seat in 2025.
What would you prefer, Josh? This type of awareness to where you are as a coach, or let's go back to, let's say, 2013, because I think one of the funniest things that we see is anytime somebody, runs fast at the combine or at workouts, they're always looking for Mike McDaniel. Do you prefer this, where you have Mike McDaniel, your coach, getting excited about speed, or would you rather have it panned to Dolphin coaches and you see Mike Sherman just sleeping?
Yeah, I like it much better now. Thanks for reminding of the days that, made us fall in love with this team for for lack of a better word, right?
We looked back, Josh. Let's go ahead. Let's start looking at the future of the Miami Dolphins. Over the cap, the guys over there were kind of digging into the numbers here a little bit, and they noticed that the Dolphins have decided to charge only 2.2 of Zach Wilson's $6 million salary and $6 million cap charge to this year's cap, giving the Miami Dolphins at the time up to $21 million in cap space. Josh, that means Zach Wilson has a salary cap hit of $3.8 million in 2026. There's two sides of this sword, because this money can simply slide over next year if you don't use it, or the Miami Dolphins are building up their war chest to sign some players. Josh, which side of the coin are you leaning on?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're just kind of, holding things out. But I mean, I just, it's just so funny, right? We always joke that there's the salary cap's not real, and then you hear things like this. It's like, what? They're not charging this, that, and the other thing. Like, there's so many different things with the salary cap that I don't even, truly get a full grasp of. But I think they are kind of just building up that war chest, and maybe, Calais Campbell might take up a big chunk of this, right? If he comes back, I think 10 million goes towards the rookie class. So there are some other needs there, but I would love for them to make like some kind of, game shifting, a move that maybe, shifts some of the hype in the AFC East. But yeah, I think they're just kind of holding on to their coins. What about you? What do you think? They're going to make a big move?
Jake, why are you all riled up? It's only a $2.2 million change from the $6 million. Well, I failed to add that Austin Jackson also restructured his contract, which still one of the most mind-boggling people, strictly because he's on his second contract. He was a 2020 first-round pick, and the dude's still only like 25 years old. It is absolutely insane to me how young Austin Jackson was when he came out of college. But Jackson now has 3 void years: 2027, 9.4 million, 2028, 5.2 million, and 2029, just under 2 million. The Dolphins converted 9.7 million of Jackson's salary into a signing bonus, reducing his salary cap number by roughly $8 million. Josh, I think what's happening here is that Jackson's going to be in line for another contract extension. This is what it sounds like to me. I don't see any way where the Dolphins exist with a void year for a right tackle at about $10 million. Maybe famous last words for me, but it just seems like the Dolphins are under the idea of like the best ability is availability here. So let's get about $20 million in cap space and see what happens.
Yeah, again, I wrote down it's mind-numbing. I can't quite grasp this whole salary cap thing, but I mean, we all kind of I think when we did the pod was with Dustin. I think you kind of mentioned this being one of those guys that could be restructured. So we kind of saw it happening. Again, I wonder if this money's going towards a Calais Campbell if he decides to come back. I think Mike McDaniel did say during his presser today that he might have had several suitors, which isn't surprising given that this dude's still playing at a high level. But again, I don't know if there's anything that they're going to truly do here. But when you see that restructure, when hear about the Zach Wilson stuff, it almost sounds like they're gearing up to do something. I just don't know what that move could be. Could it be Jared Alexander? That'd be so good, wouldn't it? We need a cornerback bad. I was thinking about you brought that up too. I think in a previous pod. There's no way it would happen, but
Dude, I don't want it. I don't want it. I really don't want to deal with another player who's just a locker room attitude. I follow a couple Packers guys. I remember the interview he did with the glasses on. I remember him going out there being a team captain. The Dolphins can't be dealing with these issues when you're in a must-win season. God, dude, I can't do Jair Alexander. I cannot do it. Nope. But Josh, what they might have used some of this cap space for, Eichenberg's back. That's pretty exciting, right? I think we did a podcast. It wasn't the last podcast we did with Kat, which go check out our 1.0 mock draft. 2 podcasts ago, we did kind of a recap of everything that was happening. And we failed to mention this man because I think it happened right when you were uploading the podcast. And it's, how do you feel about Mr. Incredible being back in Miami?
yeah, I mean, and didn't they do something wonky with his salary cap too? Like, I'm not upset about it. I think we kind of sat here and said, at least I know I had. This is our Jesse Davis. I'm fine with him being a sixth man, but if he's our starting guard again, I mean, we do not want that, right? And it kind of sounds like the Dolphins aren't against him being winning the job and being the guard again. So, for as much as I love to hear about him being that scrappy guy, right? The guy that pisses everybody off and gets under their skin. We continue to hear about that. I just would rather not see Liam Eichenberg out there. So it made me a little bit sad. I think you might have called him a masshole at one point on one of the pods because one of the comments on 560 just they were loving that. But yeah, not upset for the salary that he's going to be given as a depth piece. But please God, don't let him be a starter.
You're not going to find somebody who's played all 4 positions, who's played over 1,000 snaps in 2 of the last 4 seasons on the free agent market this late for somebody who's going to take up 1.8% of the salary cap. It's just not going to happen. I was very confused to see the original outrage and the anger over bringing someone like that back. Until we start talking about him as a starter, Josh, we cannot do this again, man. We cannot have Liam Eichenberg be. Let me back up just a second. It'd be one thing if he has to start 5-6 games. You cannot go into the year as him the number 1 on the depth chart. It just speaks so poorly to the amount of depth. And Josh, this is a franchise that hasn't played 5 of the same offensive linemen for at least 10 games since 2022. The inconsistencies have been outrageous. For that, I like having someone like Eichenberg. He has snaps literally every spot on the line. But God, man, it's like if you have traits playing more than one offensive line position, you're probably not good at playing an offensive line position. It's kind of like that old quarterback saying. Great depth piece. I think it makes a lot of sense, especially for the price. You're not going to find something similar on the free agent market. But man, we got to be praying that there's another move coming at guard. We got to be.
And that's the hope, right? I mean, whether it's at 13, whether they find someone in the second round. I mean, we did our mock drafts. There's options out there, but yeah, man, the last thing we need is Liam Eichenberg. But like you said, I mean, first we got to remember all those injuries the Dolphins had, right? Like I forget what it was, 13 different offensive line variations or something. So like it is inevitable. So it's okay to have Liam Eichenberg there as your break in case of emergency. But yeah, man, if you're coming into the season and that's your best option there, I mean, that's no bueno.
Josh, where are you worried about more? Guard is a little wonky. I think you have James Daniels, who he's been pretty open. Like I can start left guard, I can start right guard. He actually had a great line about like, just let me know soon. This is what OTAs are for. Like I'm ready to get to work and play out whatever position like it. Great interview. On the offensive line, 2 of your 3 top options at guard currently, Liam Eichenberg and Jackson Carman. On the defensive line, you got Benito Jones returning. Which one's in a worse spot right now?
Yeah, man. I mean, if you don't even look at the Calais Campbell thing kind of lingering in the back, I mean, it sounds like defensive tackle, right? I mean, it's a little bit of a concern. Again, I think these are the 2 positions the Dolphins need to improve the most heading into this draft. I think that both sides, defensive tackles definitely, one of those, groups in this draft class that are just loaded. But yeah, man, I'm feeling a little bit uneasy about defense tackle. For as much as I like Benito Jones, what he started 30 of 57 games over 4 seasons. Last year started 15-17 with Miami. We saw the type of relationship he had with Calais Campbell, and he kind of, I don't want to say took the next step, right? He's still a role player, he's still a depth piece, but he looked serviceable. So I like Benito Jones, but that's a long-winded way of saying that I'm more confident in. You said Jackson Carman though, right? Can we? Is Larry Borum? He's thrown in there too, right? Like there's
I think he's going to be
potential.
a tackle.
Yeah, I think
Who
he's going to be that shifty, that Kendall Lamb type guy. Still defensive tackle. What about you? Do you think guard's a little bit more concerning?
Nope, nope, nope. I think it's defensive tackle 100%. Guard is super concerning, but I do think there are some scenarios where you could draft a guy in the 3rd round. The only thing I worry about, man, like if you're a rookie defensive tackle, you're dealing with a bunch of grown ass men in the trenches. Like that's the only thing. Like, and don't get me wrong, across the field, like it's not easy for rookies, but man, you see yourself being 20, 21 years old, just trying to grow into your body. It's like Scrappy Doo in the first live action Scooby Doo movie when he's all disoriented. It's like that's what some of these defensive linemen are going to be like in their first season. Like they need to grow into their bodies still. These guys are still 21, 22 years old where you do like say, all right, let's draft a guy in the 2nd and the 4th, and we'll be feeling pretty good about it. We'll talk about it all throughout camp. But man, is that a healthy process when you're trying to win games in December and January when you need dogs? Like last season, the Dolphins, were signing everybody on the defensive line. Guys like Tier Tart, who didn't even make the roster, ended up, being fine, I think, for the Chargers. I just think it's a little weird they haven't been signing anyone. You saw someone like Deshaun Hand sign for about $4 million with the Chargers. You see the sorcery Chris Greer does with the salary cap, where you could make that cap hit $1 million for this year, $3 million next year, whatever it may be, to get him back. It's very weird they didn't do the same thing, where I'd be okay if you took 7 defensive tackles and just let them, brawl it out type of thing.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And again, it's almost like they're putting a lot of stock into Campbell. I think it was Cat on one of our recent pods, said it was frustrating how they're sitting here just kind of letting all these other guys sign, these guys that could come in and maybe be, starters. Who knows what they could come of it. So maybe they have a guy, out there or someone in mind outside of Calais Campbell. But either way, even if you bring him back, right, you're going to be probably relying on a rookie. And Jake, that's absolutely a concern, like you said, when these young guys are just growing into their bodies, they're going against these dogs in the trenches. It could be a learning curve, but Dolphins don't seem to be concerned with it. But that's not to say we shouldn't be, right? They've proven to us before that just because they're not concerned doesn't mean we shouldn't be.
Javon Holland is breaking House Rules podcast. He did a show right after he signed with the Giants where he kind of talked about what was interesting about the Giants, but he also dove into where the Dolphins are and what they're doing on defense. He kind of explained that in this Anthony Weaver system, you're building up front and working towards the back, and that's been probably my biggest argument to avoiding safety in round one. It sounds like this Dolphins defense isn't going to be doing quite a lot in the safety. Like they aren't going to be asking them to be doing too much. I mean, you're going from Jordan Poyer and Javon Holland, who combined to start 160 games, to a combo who have started a combined like 36, I think it is. It's over 100 career starts different. You don't do that unless you kind of have a plan in mind. But God, man, when you're talking about building up front and working to the back, what's going on at defensive tackle? Because they're adding edge rushers, they're restructuring Bradley Chubb and Josh at linebacker. This was a pretty exciting move. Willie Gay, former Kansas City Chiefs linebacker, 2-time Super Bowl champion, added to this unit that already includes Tyrell Dodson, Jordan Brooks. They added KJ Britt from Tampa Bay. Channing Tindall, he's still lurking too, Josh. But what was your initial thought here when the Dolphins decided to add Willie Gay, especially it seemed a little bit after the first wave of free agency where things were seemed pretty calm?
Yeah, I was gonna say, it kind of almost seemed like it was a little bit out of nowhere in a way, but I mean, it was like you said, it was a pleasant surprise. I mean, despite what he did last or didn't do last season, right? He had a disappointing year with the Saints, but I mean, this is a guy who very talented. He's still, I think he's only 26 years old. Not again a down season last year, but before that, started 47 and 57 games with the Chiefs, 233 total tackles. I mean, adding him to this unit, like you said, with Jordan Brooks, having Willie Gay most likely as a starter, then you still got Dotson, KJ Britt. I mean, this linebacking core is starting to shape together. I mean, I didn't mention Channing Tindall either. I think he celebrated a birthday recently, so maybe they're planning on keeping him around. But regardless, man, that linebacking core looks very nice. And a thing with Willie Gay, I think he can, cover a little bit, which is something that, the Dolphins desperately need. You mentioned the safeties. I mean, when you have Jordan Brooks who can, follow some of those tight ends down the seam and things like that. Now you got Willie Gay on the other side. I mean, and Dotson, right? I mean, he was an interception machine last season. So I like this linebacking core. and like this signing a lot. But it was a 1-year deal, which, like you touched on, man, what's that say about the future of these guys? I mean, their asses are definitely getting hot on that hot seat.
So he was with the Saints last year, Willie Gay, and I didn't think it was really a good scheme fit. And what the Saints are doing, man, it's every year it's just throwing stuff at the wall to go 7-9. It feels like. I really like this
That
signing. I
that
think it's
does sound familiar. Sorry, I had to get you 7-9, throwing stuff against the wall to go 7-9. That's like our life, right? Up until the last few years.
it's a strong point, man. You you just ruined my entire argument. No, but so we were talking earlier about Tyreek Hill adding or wanting the Dolphins to add dogs. I think a two-time Super Bowl champion, somebody who started quite a bit for the Kansas City Chiefs over his 4-year stretch. I think that'd be a check off is in the dog territory.
Yeah, sorry for throwing you off with that, but yeah, I think he's a dog, and I think he could, truly shift this defense. I mean, I think you talked about on Blue Sky with Winkfield before, but the success that Anthony Weaver had at Baltimore had a lot to do with those linebackers, right? And yes, we like what Dotson did, but they still could have brought in another dog, and I think Willie Gay fits that. And he played with Tyreek Hill, right? Were they on the same team together? I believe if he was there for 4 seasons, so two dogs. I mean, we'll see what comes of it. Maybe they can bring one of those Super Bowls to Miami, like we've long yearned for.
Friend of the show, Eric Smith, I hope I'm not misquoting this. He kind of summarized it perfectly because looking back to last year, I thought the Dolphins had a good trio going into the year: David Long, Jordan Brooks, and Anthony Walker, and quickly realized you need more than that. So I'm glad the Dolphins aren't just going with the trio. Uh, but Eric Smith, friend of the show, said that while Jordan Brooks and Tyrell Dodson are likely your starters, you have KJ Britt, who's good on the first two downs of every series, and then you got Willie Gay, who's good on the last two. So KJ Britt might not be that guy in coverage, but he's a better tackler, while Willie Gay is somebody you can feel a little more comfortable with if he has to drop back a little bit. So I thought that was a little unique where the Dolphins Willie Gay sounds like the Duke Riley upgrade. And to me, man, Duke Riley, he came to Miami as a former special teams ace, like a fallback, going from, special team part-time starter, part-time rapper to former Super Bowl champion as your backup. I think that's a pretty good switch here.
Yeah, I mean, look at this unit. I mean, at one point, a few years ago, it seemed like this was like even so, heading into last year, like there were pieces where at some point you're like, they could still upgrade here and there. And now you look at this unit and what they did over the last few years. I mean, I don't want to say you're excited about, but it brings some excitement to that middle of Anthony Weaver's defense. So they still got to get a defense tackle. They still got to get safety, but that middle, that linebacking unit, I like it.
The Dolphins also added a tight end in the form of Pharaoh Brown. It was interesting. I think he kind of said it, beggars can't be choosers for his decision to
That was
sign with the
bad.
Dolphins.
People
He
were mad
started
about that somewhere.
How I don't know how you can be. If a team has a vision for you that, maybe hasn't been developed by others, or maybe this is going to be your inline blocking tight end, I don't see any issue with that in that level of honesty. Started 54 of 87 games over his 7-year career, played for the Seahawks in 2024, caught 8 of 12 targets for 65 yards last year. Josh, I do have to note that he did have 3 receptions longer than 8 yards. And I do have to say, in case anybody forgot, Durham Smythe, who had only 53 receiving yards last season. His longest reception was 8 yards, and he did it 3 times. So you already have Pharaoh Brown, a new blocking tight end, who has 3 receptions longer than 8 yards. So not saying it's his main job, but I mean, getting a 12-yard reception here or there could be pretty exciting.
Yeah, I mean, maybe breaking a tackle too. That was Mike Gesicki, a
Oh,
comeback tackle. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of an upgrade. At least on paper, we see the upgrade. I think my favorite thing was, I believe it was Travis Wingfield said it on Blue Sky or something. But I think he had an interview with Pharaoh Brown where Brown was like, I don't care if I catch a target all season. I'm coming here to be that Y tight end. John Emery wants me to be the best one of the best blocking tight ends in football. So to hear that, to think about that, be that alone, just that mentality almost seems like an upgrade over Durham Smythe. But to have him out there, to add him to this offensive line that we're starting to see reshaped, I mean, he's not going to be a receiving threat, right? He's not going to be, that big of a game changer. But just to have him there to be alongside John Smith to do some of that gritty work, to see what it does in the run game, I'm excited for it. And to hear him say he wants to be, that best blocking tight end, I mean, that's awesome. But some people were upset with the beggars can't be choosers, which why should you be, man? We're all in that spot, right? Like you can't like you can't beg and choose. Like you go where you're wanted.
oh no, I'm being begged to play professional football for the Miami Dolphins. What a terrible situation. And he kind of has that, like, I'm hungry, I'm ready to work, where he's like, I'll block, I don't care. It's nice to hear that attitude. Jonnu Smith, Pharaoh Cooper, Julian Hill, Tanner Connor. Josh, how you feeling about this unit?
Yeah, I think it looks good. I mean, I put Tanner Connor's name there because he's still in the roster, and we're just waiting, right? He's supposed to be able to do something. So I'm hoping that we can see something there. But I like it. Replacing Smythe with even Julian Hill, I think I probably would have been okay with that. I mean, Julian Hill has shown that he can be serviceable in blocking. So adding Pharaoh Cooper there too. I mean, I like it. So it's again not as comparing it with the linebacking unit, it's not as quite there as I see that. I mean, I'd still love to get Tyler Warren. I think we'd all love to see Mason Taylor or someone still add to this room, but I like what they bring and how they complement each other. Because again, Jonnu Smith's not going to be, lead blocking or doing any of that crazy shit that Pharaoh Cooper might be, and he's not going to be, the Jonnu Smith who I still feel like the Dolphins can tap into some of Smith's potential as well. So I like this room. What about you, Jake?
I don't know, dude. I legitimately don't know. Jonnu Smith, he's on the final year of his contract. The same. Pharaoh Cooper signs a 1-year deal. Julian Hill and Tanner Connor, they kind of seem like different type of players. Where Tanner Connor, you're hoping can be like Jonnu Smith. Julian Hill more like Pharaoh Cooper. You do wonder if this unit is still missing something else. Josh, do you have an idea of where like Mason Taylor has been going in like mock drafts here? Would that be like your second round pick? Because that's the thing. The Dolphins have a third round pick, but being one of the compensatory picks, I'm basically under the impression that it's a fourth round pick, like a start of the fourth round pick, because it's just so far back there. There's going to be 32 picks before that, where you're not going to be getting one of the top, 90 prospects in most scenarios.
Yeah, definitely an asterisk next to that, breaking it down that way. I think he is rumored to go, or, is projected to go round two. I think there's some hoopla over whether or not he's tight end two or whether tight end three or wherever he might be, but in comparison. But yeah, I think he's going to go on day two. And I do think I agree with you, man. You can't wait until that third pick or fourth pick, fourth round pick to take a guy like him if that's who you want to add. So I think he'll go before that. But, it's the NFL, right, man? All it takes is, I don't know, man, stranger things have happened than Mason Taylor, I'm sure, falling that far down.
I mentioned $22 million in cap space earlier, and that started to dwindle once you incorporate Willie Gay and you incorporate Pharaoh Brown. So the Dolphins, Josh, are sitting at about $16 million in cap space. This late in the year, you're usually feeling pretty good about that, but I wanted to spend a little time talking about this because I don't necessarily know if that's the case for the Miami Dolphins. So let's start with the draft class. Josh, I thought this was one of the most confusing things because, you mentioned it earlier, $10 million for the rookie class. I don't know if it's $10 million because Chop Robinson, I think he was making about $3 million last year. And being your first round pick, he's the most expensive. So obviously you got to add in 9 more players, but I don't think all 9 are going to be close to $1 million, especially if they're 7th round picks. So I don't know for sure if it's going to be upwards of $10 million, but I do think something we got to pencil in right away is this draft class is going to bring you down to about $8 to $10 million or so.
Yeah, and that's why we're sitting here. We joke that they could be getting ready to do something, make a big splash, make a big trade, sign a, whatever it may be. But I don't know that they can with the way it's set up. So yeah, I don't know where. I think Spotrac or something. Maybe they have between 6 and 8, and I was just off by. I don't know why I thought it was 8 or 10. But either way, the Dolphins have to put some of that money aside. I again just wonder if they're going to make a big splash again because the Terron Armstead stuff. Did we touch on that? The quote from Mike McDaniel, or is that what you're playing here? Because there's still so much uncertainty there with Tyron Armstead.
That is why I wanted to bring this up, Josh, because despite $16 million in cap space, the Dolphins have tried to pull so many different levers with their salary cap is that it's going to be coming to a head pretty soon. Let's start with Terron Armstead, where Mike McDaniel said, we have had an unbelievable amount of conversations about his body and how he feels. It hasn't ever been about Terron's play, right? It's been about how he's been available, and he's been straining to be more available for us than a counterpart would. He's played through a lot of stuff. I think he even went on to say there was more word salad when they were talking about maybe a role that isn't a full-time starter. But Josh, what was your impression to hear Mike McDaniel talking about Armstead? Just kind of this availability and managing the injuries. It doesn't really feel like much has moved since we last heard from him. Jesus.
Yeah, it didn't seem like much moved, but at the same time, it didn't seem like he was kind of. I don't want to say he wasn't holding anything back, but he was kind of very honest and transparent. I mean, we all see it, right? We know that Terron Armstead's not available, and we know the best ability is availability. But when he's out there, he's one of the best. So to hear him kind of say, he's kind of getting further down the line of being available. And it almost sounded like there was a quote where, again, this you can go find on their YouTube channel. You can go listen to Mike McDaniel talk for an hour, I think, stutter around, whatever it might be. But I think there was a point where he said, I lost my train of thought there, but I don't know what I'm saying, Jake. Sorry.
Mike McDaniel was asked if Terron Armstead will come back as a starter or reserve, and he responded, "That's something that I think that will kind of be motivated by ... The great thing about Terron is that I the great thing about Terron and I is we have had an unbelievable amount of conversation about his body, is how he feels. And so I think it's tied to that, where he's at relative to other years and how we can realistically forecast it. I think that's going to kind of shape the answer to that question, because it hasn't ever been about Terron's play. It's been about how he's been available, and he's been straining to be more available for us than probably a counterpart would. He's played through a lot of stuff. I think we're fortunate that we have a heavy amount of reps on the topic, and we'll be able to have that conversation about what that looks like, because that will be clean when that comes, and when he'll be coming back, as whether that, and if he would ever be able to compete, to be able to withstand the rigors of that season as a starter. I don't know. I have no idea what I just said, Josh. I blacked out.
Yeah, that's what I was doing, trying to get my thoughts out there too. Yeah, I mean, it almost sounded like he said, they maybe even had discussions of him being like a role player, depth piece. But I don't know, man. Mike McDaniel, you do not get a lot out of what he's saying. I can't ever see Terron Armstead coming back in that situation, to be just a depth piece. I think they both agree that Terron Armstead's only coming back if his body can hold up and he knows that he can play. So, yeah, not a lot there, but it sounds like at least moving forward, the Dolphins might not have Terron Armstead. And is that really the worst thing? Right? It's Patrick Paul's time to shine. Austin Jackson's on the other side. And then you just keep Terron Armstead, kind of break in case of emergency, like keep him on speed dial, right? If something catastrophic happens. I mean, I don't know, man. It sounds like Terron Armstead's not going to be a Dolphin. What do you think?
This is so tough, because Terron, in order to give him the time he needs to really digest the idea of retirement, he brought his base down salary down to $1.2 million. The same is true for Bradley Chubb. So when you're talking about somebody who is as talented as he is, you do wonder, well, if he comes back, he ain't playing for $1.2 million. And if he comes back and he's not the starter and he's going to need money, and the Dolphins only have about $10 million in salary cap, this is a huge issue. This is a huge thing the Dolphins need to figure out, like last week. I get giving Tron his time, and I understand giving him his time. And Josh, as I try to unjumble that Mike McDaniel quote, it almost makes it sound like, okay, we go through spring, Terron Armstead comes back, he's going to win the starting job. That's kind of what McDaniel says. Like, he's one of the best left tackles in the league, and I don't disagree. So how do you make him a backup? And when do you choose to play him? And I think that, as I start to think about those quotes, those are the tough questions where I don't have an answer to. Like, do you just wait? Like, he's gonna be our starter from Thanksgiving on. Like, how is that fair to Patrick Paul, who's gonna say he's going to be ready after just sitting on the sideline for 4 months, is gonna be ready to jump it in place? So all of a sudden, man, I don't know.
Yeah, it's almost like Terron Armstead, kind of like the Calais Campbell situation. They kind of got the Dolphins in a stranglehold, right? The Dolphins got to, they almost got to wait for them to decide. I think I agree with you, though. If Terron Armstead, if he comes back, he's absolutely starting. And what does that mean about Patrick Paul? How does that look? Does that, maybe show that you're not as confident in Patrick Paul? I mean, it's Terron Armstead, right? There's only so many left tackles as good as him. And for a team, like we said earlier, with the Tyreek Hill situation, these guys are playing for their livelihood, right? So do you let Terron Armstead come back and be that starter, knowing that he is, when he's out there, an elite player? I mean, Dolphins are in a situation that, like you mentioned, Jake, should have been wrapped up weeks ago. And, that's another reason why we're probably not going to see a blockbuster trade go down, right? We're talking about Calais Campbell being, kind of waiting in the wings, deciding on what he's going to do. Terron Armstead's doing the same thing. So the Dolphins have to have that money, on the back burner in case Armstead comes back, because then you're pigeonholed. So, yeah, man, a lot of interesting times for the Miami Dolphins. And like you said, man, it's what people will be listed this on April 1st. And we're sitting here spiraling out of control with all sorts of different Charlie things going on.
Hand up for being a total dumb guy. I should have just looked at those contracts about how much the rookies would cost for this year. But let's just say, Josh, you're sitting there, you save, for simple math, you have $16 million. We'll push $6 million to the side for the salary cap. You still have holes. Even if both Armstead and Calais Campbell come back, you still have holes at guard. You have holes at defensive tackle, cornerback, and safety. You have $10 million to work with, dude. This is absolutely insane. It's such a unique scenario that the Dolphins find themselves in with both of these guys. Where, how do you see it? Where's the resolution, would you say?
Yeah, I mean, I think we just got to part ways, right? I did look it up. I'm sorry, I kind of blacked out there. I looked it up. 12 million is what Spotrac or Over the Cap has written down for the Dolphins rookie pool. So,
Now,
um,
is that might be the length of their entire contracts? Because, dude, I'm just looking at like Chop Robinson. His cap hit is $3.4 million, and the cap hits just get smaller from there. So there's got to be like, again, sorry, this is probably research we should have done off the show, but like it's just very weird to me that you need to pencil away that much money, which makes me think like maybe those are all the 4-year deals. I don't know.
yeah, I'm not entirely sure either. But either way, the Dolphins, they need to worry about that on top of the Terron Armstead, the Calais Campbell. For me, in the perfect world, right? If Terron Armstead comes back, you could maybe trade him away, right? Or they even have that flexibility? I don't even know how his contract's set up. Where they, again, forgive me for not looking that up, but then that becomes the issue, right? Patrick Paul, Terron Armstead. I mean, you want Patrick Paul out there. You want him to be your starter in 2025. You just got to wait for Terron Armstead to make that decision.
So Terron Armstead's cap hit currently is $9 million. If he's traded post June 1st, the Dolphins only save his base salary of $1.2 million. If it's a pre June 1st for Terron Armstead, yeah, the Dolphins aren't going to trade him pre June 1st. Let's just say that. So, dude, like, I'm just having such a hard time figuring out where the Miami Dolphins go next with these two issues, all the cap holes. Like, is there going to be that mammoth trade coming, or is this going to be something where the void years just continue to work for the Miami Dolphins? Josh, considering everything we've spoken about, I want to wrap with this final question here. Let's say the draft class is going to be your big way to really revamp the roster. 2 offensive linemen or 2 defensive linemen in 2 of Miami's first 4 picks?
Without Campbell, I think you do 2 defensive linemen. I think if Campbell signs, I mean, you shouldn't let a 38-year-old, defense tackle dictate what you do in the draft. So I don't. Maybe my answer stays the same, but I feel like two defensive linemen in the first. Because do we count edge in there too? Like, can we cheat a little bit and count edge? That'd be cheating. Yeah. So defensive tackles, I'll go 2. What do you think? I guess
I think you
Armstead's decision, right? That ties into this too. Well, no, it doesn't. It shouldn't. I don't know.
I think you go offense. Why I think you go offense, Josh, is because I'm just so tired of every year, like Chris Greer taking the like, let's get starters at everything. Lean into your strengths and weaknesses. If defensive tackle is going to be an issue, and God, man, like there's a real scenario where any team can just run up the middle for 4 yards every play, and that's how the Dolphins lose football games. The way to counter that is the NFL's best offense, right? Like you could like put your trust in a second round defensive tackle to come on in and be great. Like the Dolphins did that, twice in the last decade, and Jordan Phillips and Raekwon Davis. And how well did either of those work out? Right? Like they was fine. They were fine. They were good rotational pieces. But I think if the Miami Dolphins are going to win football games, it's not by having, the killer bees on defense. It's by having an offense that's just well-rounded and good. Like it's not the 2022 team that scores in 2 plays. It's a well-rounded team that we can score in 2 plays if we're down 7, but we can also turn this into a 20-play drive and take up 10 minutes of clock if we're up by 7. I think when you look at the way the Dolphins roster is built, that's where I'd go, where you could say, like, it's crazy to me how far Kelvin Banks has been falling into some people's opinions, but like when you could sit there and say, all right, let's add Kelvin Banks. So not only do you have a starting guard, you have another tackle that can come in with Larry Borum and be one of those guys. Like Josh, remember week 15 last year, a must-win game for the Miami Dolphins against the Houston Texans. Jackson Carman started his first game of his career at right tackle. The Miami Dolphins were down to their 5th tackle. You can't let that happen again. So if you get someone like Kelvin Banks at 13 to be that guard, and then you kind of get that, 6th, 7th offensive lineman that can kind of dethrone Liam Eichenberg in the 2nd or 3rd round, I think that's how you build a draft that can help this team this year and maybe a couple of years down the road if these picks work out.
Yeah, I like your answer better. You already sold me because you're right, man. This offense, if the Dolphins want to have any success, it's not going to be about what the defense does. It's going to be about this offense, and it's built to, outscore teams, right? I mean, so why not just lean into that, fix that offensive line once and for all, so we're not dealing with Jackson Carman. Man, I kind of forgot about that. That pains me to hear Jackson Carman we ran it out there. Jackson Carman starting Unreal.
What a great note to end the podcast on. Thank you all so much for listening to Another Dolphins podcast. We've been getting some great feedback, a couple of emails about our last podcast, our 1.0 mock draft. Something everybody should keep in mind about that draft. It's how we would build the Miami Dolphins. Some people kind of ignored that. They didn't add examples of, hey, this is what you should do instead. It was more of just, wow, this sucks. The reason I thought Cat's draft was so good is because it wasn't from the scope of Chris Grier being on having his butt on complete fire. You know, we mentioned near the top, Josh, that the Dolphins aren't spending money past the 2025 season. James Daniels only. If the Dolphins had a different GM that was safer than Chris Grier, if they had a different coach that was safer than Mike McDaniel, there's no denying that the draft plan would change. There's no denying that the plan would change. So 1.0, the perspective was how we would build the Dolphins. We're not on the hot seat. Josh, you might be if you don't start dinner in the next 20 minutes, but outside of that, sure, we don't have any hot seat to worry about. 2.0, which I think will be coming later this week. We're going to flip the coin. We're going to look at what we think the Dolphins are going to do from where they're going to be. And so I just kind of wanted to make that clear that if you go back and listen to that podcast, the perspective was as us, as GMs, not necessarily him. But that is it. That is it for my rant. Josh, do you have any final words before I take us out here?
No, I'm just trying to figure out what signing is going to happen now that, because we're probably only post this in the morning, right? April Fool's Day, happy April Fool's Day. But Dolphins, they'll probably do something overnight before we get this out. But no, just thankful for listening to this. And if you want to fire me for drafting Tyler Warren, I'm more than fine with that.
Dude, I think there is actually something to having somebody who could do they might ban the tush push, but I genuinely think having somebody, they had Durham Smythe fail at it. Like, I think you could build an offense with Tyler Warren in it. 560 WQAM. AnotherDolphinsPodcast at gmail.com. Make sure you get in touch with us. We always like hearing from our fans. But thank you all so much for listening to Another Dolphins podcast. We will be back later this week. And until then, fins up.
Fins up.